on today's episode of the Riderflex podcast. A true story for you. 1989, I was a store manager for Love's Travel Stops. Now, some of you might recognize those. They're big, giant truck stops now along the highway in the middle part of the country. When they first started, they were just little convenience stores in small towns throughout Oklahoma, Kansas, etc. Anyway, right out of college, in fact, I worked for Love's while I was in college. I worked the night shift, making deli sandwiches and running register from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I worked the night shift my junior and senior year in college. And then when I graduated, Love's offered me a management position, big management position to run a convenience store. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Anyway, my first store as a manager was in Walters, Oklahoma. Now that store is not there anymore. I think they tore the building down. But anyway, 1989, very small town outside of Lawton, Oklahoma. I mean, population like, I don't know, 1,000 people, 2,000 people. Anyway, my first store. I had this long-term employee when I first got there. She had been there for a long time and she knew everybody in town, etc. Anyway, bad employee. She needed to go. In fact, she was letting people drive off without paying for gas and not really paying attention or doing anything about it. Now, back then, 1989, you didn't use your credit card at the pump for gas. You had to, usually you filled up and then you would just come inside and pay. It was kind of on the honor system. Anyway, she was letting people get away with driving off all the time without paying and not doing anything about it. Plus, she was just a bad employee, negative employee. I needed her to go. So I fired her one day, just kind of on the spot. This is before all the human resource rules where you had to have a bunch of documentation. I just let her go. Now, keep in mind, I think I was 21 years old at the time. My first management position, really. I mean, I had been in leadership situations throughout college, et cetera, but really my first manager job. So I fired this lady, and here's what happened. Now, keep in mind, the store is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It never closes. Here's what happened. I fired her. Later on that afternoon, I saw some employees gathering in the parking lot while I was running register and, dealing with the store. They all come in. They give me their name badges and their uniforms, and they all quit. The entire crew quit on the spot. And she led that little march with the employees. There I was, running register in a convenience store that was open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I was the only one that worked there. Not a good situation. I think I worked 48 hours straight before I went home and laid down for a couple of hours. Here's how I did it, by the way. And that's a separate podcast. How I recovered from it's probably a separate episode. I just, I put a handwritten note on the door, I put a little table right there in front of the door with some applications. As I was running register, I was telling people, hey, I'm hiring. I mean, I was literally ringing up customers and interviewing somebody standing across the counter all at the same time, and just hired people left and right, just right on the spot, and told them to go in the back room and grab a name badge and an apron and come out front, and boom, they were hired. I mean, it was crazy. I got one young lady trained just enough to run the register for me to go home and lay down for a couple of hours. Then I came back and continued to recover. But what's the point of this episode? What's the point of this story, right? Number one, if you're getting ready to terminate somebody on your crew that has a pretty decent following or has been there for a long time, you better make damn sure you do some backup interviews and have some hires ready, some applications in the drawer, maybe some people you've talked to that you're ready to hire. Have some backup candidates ready to pull the trigger on and get in there quick. That's number one, which I didn't do. Number two, before you make the termination, check the pulse of the rest of the crew. Just kind of see where everybody's at. How are they feeling? Do they like Mary? Is Mary their favorite? How do they feel about Mary's performance? Just find out what kind of following the person has that you're about to terminate, and check the pulse, which I didn't do. And then the third thing I learned, well, I learned a bunch of stuff. I'm just highlighting these three. The third thing I want to point out that I learned is right after the termination, just do a good job of communicating to the people that are left why. Like make sure you pull them aside right away and say, hey, here's what happened. This is why we made this move, and communicate your why. So those three I didn't do. I didn't have backup people ready to hire. I didn't check the pulse of the crew ahead of time. And I didn't do a very good job of telling them why after I terminated the lady. I'm calling her Mary, but that wasn't her real name. So those are three things. Now, there's a lot of other lessons in this story, but those are the three things I learned. I'll do another episode on how I recovered from that and hired people in a situation where it was open 24 hours a day. I mean, it was crazy. I learned a ton that day as a young manager on what to do and what not to do. And there is your Riderflex tip of the day.